So, Pradeep, one of the things that I wanted to have your perspective on is that we have been recently posting about why institutes should adopt digitally verifiable credentials, 3 or 5 reasons why this is the more modern approach, sort of an upgrade from paper credentials and all of that. And you have been talking with a range of organizations. I wanted to get your perspective on how you see them making us progress towards this new thing. And what has been your takeaway from all of the conversations you've had?
Yeah, so Sangharsh, so let me just give a brief context in which we are discussing this particular aspect of verifiable credential. The first thing is that, normally when something untoward happens with a degree certificate or a credential of any particular standing, what normally happens is that nobody remembers the person who actually created the problem by changing certain aspects of the credential. It's always the institution that becomes the subject matter of a lot of intense debate and publicity and things like that. So, the underlying theme around all this is a huge degree of institutional credibility. That is, the bulwark on which we are going to discuss the verifiable credential story itself. Now, on a verifiable credential, I thought I'll just spend a couple of minutes to try and explain what the credential itself is and what do you mean by a digital verifiable credential, and then move on to what does it mean in terms of some benefits to the organizations that are coming onto this platform. It's the verifiable credential itself is a complete solution to issue, exchange, verify, and revoke credentials, which are basically standards based, interoperable, and secure. All the certificates issued by organizations in particular, the records of achievement, ownership, capability, authenticity, and all of that can be permanently and reliably secured using this decentralized infrastructure that we are providing. It allows stakeholders to verify the validity and status of certificates instantly, and also an ability to issue and then reliably validate certificates. And these are tamper proof, and the system is designed to provide a very, very high level of assurance around data for the issuer and the recipient of the certificate. These are generated in the system and can be time barred and set to expire after a predetermined period. So if you are looking for validity around the certificates, that can also be done. So the revocation, in case if there is a revocation, can be done by the issuing institution at any point of time. So this is an improvement over the paper certificates which are currently getting issued in the system by various institutions, right? It also, what it does is it future-proofs credential architecture through built-in compliance, because all these are done with emerging open standards. So tomorrow, if there was a need to have these verifiable credentials talking to another system, and this would be in what's called an open source basis of talking to another system. So it's got a inbuilt high interoperability positioned into it. These digital credentials are kept on the system for 99 years in our system, right? And so this is something that is available for everyone who goes down the path of verifiable digital credentials. I just wanted to talk about the verifiable credential for a moment and what it means. Now, the issuer of the verifiable credential is generally an institution. The holder of the verifiable credential is by virtue of consequence the person who receives the credential, could be a student or anyone. And if this needs to be verified, the holder is the one who then sends it for a verification to a verification institution, which verifies the verifiable credential in a matter of a few seconds, and the whole process optimizes both the time and the cost involved in this issuance. That is a very, very big plus in this whole process. So today, for example, if you take the amount of time it takes for a digital for a credential in the traditional sense to be verified, which is typically paper based, these would normally take in the region of around 25 to 30 days. And the costs in some cases are humongous in terms of the amount of money that you need to spend for this whole verification process. So there are time and cost efficiencies that are optimized in the system. The other very important bit is institutions can build what is called a student connect by virtue of the student being on this platform with a verifiable digital credential. And so let's take, for example, that if an institution needed to reach out to students who have passed out and are looking for a particular type of skill set, it's very easy for the institution to reach out and provide that access to students who would probably be people who would like to do some further studies. And so that connection between the students with institutions continues on an engaged basis. So the whole process of this verifiable credential and an ability to be part of an institution helps in a couple of things. One, it helps in discovery, it helps in engagement, it helps in an inquiry from the holder, and very importantly, it helps to transact. And so all of these are basically a part of the overall experience that one gets when one goes in for digital verifiable credentials. How is it different from what is done today? Today, the story is basically of a paper-based document largely. And if it is even digital, simple digital credential and not digital verifiable digital credential, the disadvantage is that it is, one, possibly not interoperable in many sense. Secondly, it has no mobility attached to it and therefore cannot be used in various use cases that it can be potentially used for. So this is in short what I believe is a possibility for an institution that is getting onto the logic of digital verifiable credential to make use of and to get the benefit of these credentials going forward.
I think I'll go back to a thing that you mentioned that in the current process, given the time and the cost required for verification, it might not be too difficult to imagine that only certain classes of credentials for certain kinds of transactions are actually verified to with that discipline, and the rest are probably just done visual inspection or by mapping certain characteristics in a paper certificate, like is the logo correct, is the name spelled correctly, and all of that. So one of the things I feel that the verifiable credentials also enables is a level playing field, right? In terms of the institutions now can mitigate their risks of being having their reputation tarnished, and they don't actually end required to spend that amount of money that the current system, the status quo, forces them to consider. So I think to an extent that's beautiful for institutes, and the ecosystem bit that you mentioned certainly is important to be able to build together, and that is what I wanted to bring up next. Is that this entire thing has three actors: the issuing organization, the holder, and the verifier. But the holder is a very critical piece because the holder acquires credentials through a lifetime. Especially if they're a student, they will acquire proof of knowledge, education, proof of skills, proof of accomplishment, proof of association. Perhaps they have been president of the astronomy club at their college, and they have some sorts of proofs for that as well. And then they graduate from the institute and they're looking for jobs in the market. And they're able to then probably present all of this in a far more manner. So just wanted to hear from you about this journey of a student and how the verifiable credentials makes tremendous change vis-a-vis what we have now, which is uh, paper-based portfolios that students carry along, and then multiple copies of and attested true copies and whatnot.
You hit the nail on the head, because a learner's life, when you're a recipient of credentials, it's just not the educational credentials, like you rightly put it. It could be credentials of various types and shapes, and these are credentials that it's almost like your life is in a series of credentials or affirmations and assertions through various things that you do, which someone else on the external world would like to validate at various points of time. And you're perfectly right. The amount of time that it takes, the amount of repetition, and having to prove credibility every point of time, it actually becomes an extremely difficult exercise after a point of time, depending on the type of credential that you're exhibiting to a potential verifier. So from a learner's perspective, I think that one, when and this is a little consequential because the holder or the learner is a consequence of an institution who's an issuer of the certificate. One, it keeps the student uh, his certificate active and live in real time. If there is a revocation, so be it, the revocation happens. But otherwise, the last state of the certificate is instantaneously available for a learner to keep positioning to any verifier that he needs. Second is, it comes with a lot of credibility given the fact that the person who's presenting it in the sense of a verifiable credential, he himself is not able to tamper with that certificate. All he can do is provide it, and the potential verifier can verify it in a jiffy, and that is a sure shot credibility capability for the person who's positioning the certificate for a verification. Third is, credentials are used by various institutions. I mean, sometimes I actually keep explaining this everywhere I go, that this concept of who sees value in a credential depends on the use case in which the credential is being verified. For example, a typical certificate for some or a badge for some may represent only a job offer, whereas for some it could be a matrimony based verification. For some it could be various types of verification depending on who you go and issue it to. So the possibilities of these credentials being verified in various formats and by various institutions for various different requirements is so very high, and therefore I almost call it an extension of a person's personality, which is all his badges, his credentials are all part of him. And so the ability to get this mobile, the ability to share it, is what I believe is core competent capability for a learner to provide in real time. And that definitely gives an edge to people who have these credentials. So we also sometimes when talking to institutions say, why don't you give your constituents that edge by getting them onto verifiable credentials that can help them get that edge in the marketplace when all these verifications are put to task. And you have to have a situation where you make this easy and seamless for the person who is verifying on the other side. So this, I think, is a great plus for a learner. And very clearly, these credentials also, in various cases, help him become discoverable for the sort of qualifications that he has. For example, one case that recently we saw was when an institution like nursing institutions, I mean, there are different types of nursing capabilities within nurses. And so if there is a particular requirement around a neonatal nursing capability, nurses who have passed through that particular course can be immediately discovered if they were on a verifiable digital credential. And that capability makes the discovery very sharp, time-bound, and capable of immediate verification. And so I always say that this is not to be treated as a simple verifiable digital credential. It comes with a lot of capabilities, and how robust the capability is dependent on the use case. And therefore, I think all in all, whether for an institution, whether for a learner, it's a win-win for everyone who's getting down this path. I hope that answers your question, Shakti.
Yeah, it does. And it sets up nicely for the next conversation that I want to have with Amar and Prashant probably, because they've been working on something that's going to be interesting in terms of being able to collate and organize all these credentials and create something of a digital resume, which is going to be very useful. I think it's going to get traction. So we will see how that goes. But thank you so much for your time.